Now at 11, jumped in jail.
He charged at me as soon as I got clear from the desk.
How other inmates came to the aid of this local deputy. Talk about a close call. Will this convince you to watch out for trains? Attacked on the street.
He was on the ground for a part of a minute being kicked and beaten.
Why this witness was frustrated with the response when he called 911. And stick around for the Snuggle Express. How you can get a pile of puppies delivered to your work. Our top story is that newly released video showing a violent attack in the Washington County Jail. An inmate goes after a lone deputy in a pod where dozens of inmates are roaming freely. Good evening, I'm Laurel Porter. The sheriff's deputy who was attacked is speaking out for the first time. We turn to KGW's Mike Benner for more on the deputy and an in-depth look at that video. Mike?
Yeah, I tell you what, Laurel, the jail deputies deal with unruly inmates every day, but it never escalates to this. These sort of attacks, we're told, are extremely rare. We are getting a look at this because today a judge sentenced the violent inmate you see here.
Caught on camera, a troubling scene inside the Washington County Jail. An inmate going after the lone deputy.
The fight only lasted 30 seconds.
But Deputy Daniel Guzman will tell you it was the longest 30 seconds of his life, having to fight off Hayden Davis, in jail at the time for breaking into a Beaverton home.
There had been no history between us, good or bad, no disciplinary action at any point. That was actually the first encounter I've ever had with him.
Guzman tells KGW he had just started an overtime shift. The inmates were enjoying some free time. Guzman noticed Davis circling the desk in the middle of the pod.
And every time he'd pass in front of my desk, he would just stare at me. I greeted him once and he never said anything back, but he just kept walking.
Moments later, Guzman says, Davis lunged at him. The deputy says his training kicked in and he shoved Davis to create some space.
He charged at me as soon as I got clear from the desk, so that's when I first threw the punch and he ended up on the ground.
Guzman says he could have jumped on Davis and cuffed him, but the idea of being on the ground was terrifying. There were more than 50 inmates in the room.
At that time, I didn't know who was there to help. I didn't know who was there to not help. He started charging at me again for the third time, and that's when we just started fighting.
Fortunately, another inmate did intervene. He grabbed Davis and threw him to the ground. That allowed Guzman to get control of the situation.
I'm good. No issues.
Guzman escaped with only some minor injuries to his eye and knuckles, and of course a story he'll be telling for years to come.
A lot of people asked me if I was in fear at that point, and honestly it happened so quick there was no time to actually even react to fear.
All right, believe it or not, Deputy Guzman finished his shift the day of this attack. Hats off to him. As for Hayden Davis, this morning a judge sentenced him to more than 6 years in prison for his role in the fight, as well as the original crime that landed him in jail in the first place. Laurel, back to you.
Thank you, Mike. The White House today released its official account of President Trump's call with Ukraine's president. The call is at the center of an impeachment inquiry. The notes show immediately after President Zelensky said he wanted to buy American missiles, President Trump said, quote, "I would like you to do us a favor, though," and went on to make a series of requests, including Ukraine's help investigating former Vice President Joe Biden and his son. You can read the full summary of the call for yourself on KGW.com. We have also learned tonight the whistleblower complaint about the call could be released tomorrow. We wanted to hear your take on the impeachment inquiry. KGW's Morgan Romero went out today to talk to Democrats and Republicans.
This has been a long time coming. I don't really know if it's going to make much of a difference. And what I'm worried about is that it's actually going to hurt the Democratic Party and it's going to make him get reelected next term. And that's kind of freaking me out.
Sure, this guy's not PC, and I'll be honest, that's what I like about him, but my opinion doesn't matter, okay? And the thing that matters is what he has and has not done according to the law.
A number of others feel like the inquiry is a distraction from the issues that impact their daily lives. Today, we heard from Oregon's only Republican in Congress about how he feels about impeachment. Representative Greg Walden wrote, "I've read the transcript of the phone conversation, and while it wasn't President Trump's finest moment, from what I've seen so far, it certainly does not rise to high crimes and misdemeanors. Americans deserve to get all of the facts," he wrote, including seeing both the report from the whistleblower and the transcripts of the conversations former Vice President Joe Biden has had. All but one of Oregon's Democratic representatives say they support the impeachment inquiry. Kurt Schrader's office has not responded to repeated requests for comment.
Incredulous is probably the best way I can describe it. I was utterly dumbfounded that that was the response.
New at 11, Portland 911 says a dispatcher made a mistake while taking a report about an attack on a homeless man. An internal investigation showed the call did not get the priority it deserved. Now the man who made that 911 call is sharing what he believes should have happened. KGW's Catherine Cook talked with him and a representative from Portland 911 tonight. Catherine.
Laurel, Gary Granger thought this was a clear-cut situation. He witnessed an assault, took photos, and called police. But in this story, first reported by the Willamette Week, the dispatcher argued there wasn't much of a case if the victim didn't file the report.
Right, we train people actually how to be good witnesses and not become victims.
It's what Gary Granger does as director of community safety at Reed College, and it's what he did after witnessing an attack late last month. It was around midnight. Gary was near Southwest 1st and Morrison when he saw 4 teens attacking a man he thinks was homeless. Gary snapped these photos.
But then they turned around and ran after him, and then a couple of them knocked him to the ground and beat him. He was on the ground for a part of a minute being kicked and beaten.
911, what's the address or intersection?
Gary called 911.
And there's 4 teenagers that just beat up a guy.
Gary described the suspects.
I'm a block behind him.
You don't need to follow him anymore because the guy that was assaulted didn't even call us in, so...
Well, he couldn't call it in. He's a homeless guy. He doesn't have a phone.
I'll let officers know.
After waiting a few minutes for police, Gary called 911 again. He told the same dispatcher he had photos of the attack for police. He says what happened next left him dumbfounded.
Officers will contact you if the victim calls in. That's how this works, sir, okay?
The victim is not going to call in because the victim is a homeless person.
Are you with him then?
I'm on the corner.
Are you with the homeless person?
No, I'm not. He walked off.
Like I said, if he decides to make a report, at that point we'll have a victim where we will have a crime to pursue, okay? They will contact you. You can't make a report on his behalf.
I can.
Incredulous is probably the best way I can describe it. It's like saying when I see somebody break into my neighbor's house and start to drive away with a truck full of their stuff, that you're not going to respond to the burglary because the homeowner hasn't called.
Police showed up about 20 minutes later and took Gary's information. By then, everyone involved was gone.
I would have liked BOEC to put out over the radio that there was an assault and that there was a victim and there was a witness and there were suspects all within sight of one another.
Mistakes were made by our call taker.
Portland 911 spokesman Dan Douthit says the dispatcher misprioritized the call. He says it should have been prioritized as an assault. Douthit says the dispatcher wasn't disciplined but got additional training.
We appreciate that the concern was raised because we strive to be to perfection in every one of our calls. And so if a mistake is made, we want to know about it.
Despite what happened, Gary says he won't give up on his training if he ever sees another attack.
I will still call 911. I'll still want help to come.
Gary says he's spoken with the head of Portland's Bureau of Emergency Communications. He says he appreciates that the city acknowledges that they didn't do what they should have done. Back to you.
Thank you, Catherine. In a developing story, police are searching for the man caught on camera here leaping over a market counter and assaulting an employee. This happened at the Vista Market in Milwaukee. Police say, listen to this, the same suspect has robbed this place 3 times in the past 2 months. Once he was working with an accomplice. If you recognize either of these men, call the Clackamas County Sheriff's Office. Now an update on a KGW investigation taking on robocalls. You may have seen these ads. They targeted households in Oregon and Washington, promoting air duct cleaning. But Washington's Attorney General claims the Vancouver-based operations marketing was deceptive and illegal. Our own Kylie Boshi's been investigating consumer complaints about these air duct cleaning businesses. Customers said they ended up with a huge bill, often more than $1,000, after responding to a $39 ad for air duct cleaning. The Vancouver-based operation goes by several names. Now the Washington Attorney General has filed a lawsuit. The complaint claims the company sent tens of millions of deceptive ads by mail and made illegal robocalls. The lawsuit specifically mentions KGW's investigation, including our interview in February with the general manager. Listen.
Kyle Bosch with KGW Channel 8.
Hi, how can I help you?
We have some questions about U.S. air ducts and builders.
Okay, how is that related to me?
You're involved with the company.
As much as I know, that company is closed. U.S. Air Ducts and Sky Builders, just like you mentioned, are not even open anymore. So
but you were the general manager.
I used to be when they were.
You were responsible for overseeing staff.
When the company was open, correct.
So how do you respond to those complaints about aggressive sales, marketing?
The company doesn't exist anymore. I don't have to. That's the beauty of it.
You don't have to respond to any of these complaints?
Not really, I'm sorry.
We reached out to that general manager for comment on the lawsuit. He was not available. Sad news from the Oregon Zoo tonight. Chendra, the Asian elephant, has had a miscarriage. The zoo says it doesn't know exactly what caused it. Chendra was nearly 8 months pregnant. Now, to put that into perspective, that's the end of the first trimester for elephants. The animals have a gestation period of 22 months. Chendra's pregnancy was confirmed back in July, and it came as a surprise to staff. Right now, workers are giving her around-the-clock care. When we come back, you might change the way you approach Max Tracks after seeing this. Plus, the Timbers Army gets a win in a battle with the MLS. The flags, they're allowed to fly once again. And later, Multnomah County wants to put new rules on the pods that house Portland's beloved food carts, how it could help cut down on pest problems.
Laurel, we saw pleasant temperatures earlier this afternoon. We topped out at 73 degrees, basically average for this time of year. But heading into the next couple of days, really Friday into the weekend, I'm tracking cold air, and that also means dropping snow levels. How low things get, I'll let you know coming up.